real estate, both residential and commercial, as well as infrastructure, are sectors which are traditionally critical to turning around an economy in suspended animation like we have today. There are big questions also as to how such a turnaround can be triggered, given that some of these sectors were already in a slump in the pre-coronavirus days in India. Major issues can arise around some of these essential business enablers, such as demand, for example, or regulatory support or incentives, financing, workforce, logistics, etc. And last but not the least, quick resolution of contractual disputes. Here we will today seek the views of our eminent panelists to look for some answers to these challenges. So my first question is in the first round is to Mr. Lakhani, who heads Insta Office, a very interesting startup. So Mr. Lakhani, co-working space segment has been growing at a rapid pace for the last few years, especially with startups and freelancers and small enterprises loving this option. How do you see the demand shaping up post-lockdown? And secondly, since you have been also keeping a close watch on real estate markets in the grade A and B cities, can you tell us what you foresee in terms of market demand and price correction in the short and medium term? Over to you, Mr. Lakhani.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Sumit. And thanks for your kind words. You're right. Actually, co-working has been a very important enabler, and of course, the industry has been growing at a very rapid clip in the last few years. But of course, I think the situation that we are in right now, nobody's been really spared, whether it's real estate or any other industry for that matter, or any class in that specific industry. So, for example, co-working is a segment or a class in real estate, and we are equally impacted. Now, in terms of how the impact has been, I would say, there are the three kinds of people at this point we see from a demand perspective. One is who got, you see, we are actually in an environment of extreme uncertainty. We don't know what's really going to happen. It's not, the uncertainty is not about the outcome. The uncertainty is not about how people are going to behave. The uncertainty is really about the fundamental event, how it's going to really shape up. People don't know. So in that, there are three kinds of people we've seen. One is who made up their mind, and they've decided that we're not going to spend any money for the next 3 to 6 months. We're going to take an extremely conservative view. We are going to break all our contracts, or we're going to put a hold on all our expenses. It's about 15 to 20% of the population who've actually really taken a call like that. There are other 20, 25% people who've actually taken a sort of step back, been clear, they've come back, they're coming from a sense of optimism, which is that, yes, we are going to live through this, but we would need sort of support from all our stakeholders. So they've come back asking for support, renegotiations, but I still see a large part of the population from a demand perspective is completely suspended. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to make a decision. They don't want to really decide. They don't want to strategize really at this point. And nobody can really blame them because there's just so much uncertainty. So to answer your question in terms of how the demand would shape up for the industry, I think in immediate term, we can, I think it's a complete pause on the economic cycle. It's not even that the demand is going to really decline. It's a complete pause. Having said this, I think we've seen a very, very strong positive and sentiment about the industry post-COVID. I think we are going to have a new normal in the real estate sector as well, or office space strategy generally. So we see that in the new normal, whether office or any other expense, all variable expense models are going to be much faster on the recovery curve. Co-working being one of the most flexible variable cost model from a workplace strategy perspective, we are very positive that it's going to be a very strong momentum in the post-COVID environment. When that comes is an important question to answer. I don't know who has the answer to that really. Now, you interestingly, you really talk, the tier 2, tier 3 city, as you mentioned, is very interesting here. Because what we see is that there's going to be people, everybody's talking about work from home. I don't know how practical in a long-term perspective is work from home, but one thing is sure. One thing is sure that we are going to have remote work, a larger acceptance of remote work from home or not. But remote working is really going to pick up. Now, when that happens, I don't think a large part of the employee base of very large companies are going to stay in main cities. If there is remote working, if you're working for a company in Delhi, let's say HCL, TCS, whatever, I don't think you want to stay in Delhi anymore if you have to come to your main office only 5 times in a month. You would probably go back and stay in Jaipur or Indore, any other tier 2 cities that you come from. Now, that's a beautiful opportunity, not just for commercial real estate, but co-working spaces as well, because households generally, not all households are equipped to actually accommodate work from home. Particularly if you go to tier 2, tier 3 cities, the infrastructure or the productivity infrastructure, whether it regards to internet or whatever services you need in an office, are not so organized. So tier 2, 3 cities, we really see an opportunity. When that would happen, I think we're still at least 12 months away from that. Next 6 to 18 months is the time I think if the certainty comes in the next 6 months, I think we have a recovery of 12 to 18 months. If the certainty takes longer, I think we have a longer battle to fight.
Thanks, Mr. Lakhani. That was good insight. And I think in an aside, probably you are advising us to buy up flats in satellite cities and smaller cities, right? Let's do it.
Yes. The price correction you said, yes, price correction is definitely going to happen. And anybody who has the ability should, this is the time to pick up good assets.
Yeah, right. So my next question is to Mr. Sanjeev Gupta of Larsen & Toubro. My first company, by the way, my college after college, my university after university. So, Mr. Gupta, government has allowed partial construction activities to commence since last 20th April, while following the SOP for social distancing. And how feasible do you think this is, and what are the bottlenecks you might face going forward? What challenges you do foresee in respect of building materials, supply chains, construction workers, which is today a big question mark apparently, and cash flows? And the second part of the question is, as you know, the government finances are already stretched. This second part of the question is related to the demand a little bit. As you know, government finances are already stretched in dealing with this pandemic and in providing relief to the poorer sections. In such a scenario, what kind of new infra projects do you expect to come up? What kind of investments do you expect to flow into infrastructure in terms of new projects? Do you expect turnkey projects? Do you expect hybrids, PPPs, or any other types? What is your outlook for the order booking in infra vis-a-vis real estate space?
Good evening to everyone. The permission from the government side has come for starting the work, but I think that is the easiest part. We had anticipated that something like this is going to happen and there's going to be lockdown, because we were seeing all around the world that that this COVID is spreading and impact is going to come on the construction sector. So we had started taking little bit of precautions in the construction sector. I don't know how many guys did it.
Mr. Gupta, just 1 minute. I think there is Siddharth, you want to say something?
Yes, sir, your voice is a little muffled.
Is it okay now?
Is it better now?
It's a little better. It's a little better.
Yeah. If you can come closer to the microphone, Mr. Gupta.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, yes, sir. Much better.
Oh, okay. So what I was saying is that we had started anticipating that something like this is going to happen. And we had started preparing ourselves for this. So in construction sector, what happens is that, see, if any crisis comes, let it be a flood or let it be any epidemic, I think the first part of the government that goes to is towards spending in the infrastructure. In the floods also, we have seen that if there's any flood, the government starts spending on the infrastructure. See, there are challenges. You see, the biggest challenge which is coming for the construction sector is that how to retain labor. Because the moment such news comes, all the labor start going, and that we have seen on the news clips that, the people accumulated in Delhi and people wanted to transport them from Delhi to UP and Bihar and all that. Okay. Now, this is one thing which is the biggest challenge, and the companies who can really manage this, it means the people who had on their projects, if they can be managed and they can be held back there. I think this challenge has to be overcome like this. So what we have done in our organization is that we retained those workers, we took care of them, and we sent money to their home, we took care of their food and things like that. So I think the biggest challenge for construction sector to continue is that if we can build the trust between our staff and labor for retention on the project sites, the construction will continue. See, construction sites are usually, except for urban infrastructure, they are not usually near the cities. And as I understand that this disease has started, starting from airport, from big cities and coming down towards smaller places. So construction sites are not so much affected if you are able to isolate your people and labor from the infection. Now, construction is a big logistic problem. See, it is not only that if you have manpower, if you have only one type of resource, if you have machine, you can work. It is also the supply of material, building materials and cement and things like that. Like, for example, I will give you the example of cement. The cement, for us, it comes from, say, a number of green zones. And then our projects are in the yellow zone, in the green zone and red zone. So like we have started talking to the cement industry that how you're going to supply cement to us. You are working in green zone, how we can bring your people inside, how your trucks and supply things can go back from red zone to green zone. Similarly, there are also some factories which are in the yellow zone, but I think mostly cement factories, since they are in the isolated places, they will qualify for the green zone, and the challenge would be that how to bring those things from green zone to red zone and send them back in a safe manner. And I think we have been talking to them, and it is happening. So this is one thing which we said. And then apart from this, what is happening is that today it's a matter of trust. Like, whatever we are doing, whether our stakeholders, like our clients, like our engineers, if they are having confidence in us that we are doing in the right way. See, today government has given the permission, but if you see bottom side of this, the responsibility has been transferred to the contractors. They said that you follow the norms given by the Home Ministry and the norms given by the Health Ministry. As long as you are following these norms, you can continue with the construction. The challenge comes that how to follow these norms. Like, one thing is very easily said, that you maintain the norms of social distancing. In a construction, I think if somebody goes to the literal meaning of social distancing, it is not possible that somebody can maintain social distancing and do construction also. So we have to find a way that how to follow the norms to the extent they can be followed. One way of maintaining, like for example, the social distancing is that keep your people isolated, keep your people in a place that they don't carry infection. And if there is a group of people who are certified, say for last 2 to 3 weeks or 4 weeks, then they are okay. Maybe social distancing is not required to that extent. So this is how we have started now after this permission has come. Government has been very, very cooperative in the sense, like, the PM had announced that the permission will come from tomorrow, and next morning before lunch, the guidelines of Ministry of Home had come, and followed by evening, the state governments also give guidelines, and the message had gone very clearly to the district magistrates and SDOs. So the challenge was first to take passes from them, because you see, they say that you can take permission, but we have to take permission by names and for about 5,000 to 6,000 people in a matter of few days. Because see, today what happens is that the moment permission comes, the next day they ask that when the work is starting, how the work is progressing, whether it is moving or not. So it becomes a type of fight for us in the sense that, you see, the permission has come, and then when we pick up, and there is a period of transition and learning, if there are new norms of working, how to sanitize them, how to change the habits. Like for example, if you say that there is a worker, he'll start using the phone from someone else, which is not permitted as per the social norms. Somebody drinks water from the other's bottle. It is not permitted as per the social norms. So construction is one thing which will have to train itself, which will have to transform for the new ways of working. And we have to come back and see that how we are able to keep manpower not affected by infection. See, the only problem in this incidence is that there is a danger of infection. Apart from that, nothing has changed. The cement factories are same, the building materials are same, the machines are same. If we can sanitize everything, if we can keep everyone sanitized on our side, then it works. Another challenge comes is that, see, some of the people who have gone home and some of the people who have stayed back. Now the problem comes is that how to integrate them. The people who are outside, maybe they have to come from other state, they have to come from other city. Now it is difficult to move people from one city to another city, because like suppose I stay in Jaipur. Now if I go to some other place, maybe they don't allow me to enter. They say you're coming from a red zone. So first you go for 14 days quarantine and then you come and work. So principally, in my opinion, the problem in the construction is not material, not building materials or not machinery, because machineries are there. How we can manage this manpower which was working with us, how we can manage manpower who had stayed with us, how we can earn the confidence of the manpower which is stayed with us, and how we can bring people whom we need in future, because we have lost some time and the monsoon is forthcoming. So how we lost this time. For gaining this time, we have to bring some additional resources. So first, what the challenge comes is start with whatever you have on site, whatever you are confident about. Okay. So this is I think the way of moving forward. There is no specific method statement by which we can say that construction industry can move in a particular way. It will have to be realized, it will have to be learned. Maybe every day we change what we faced yesterday, what we are going to do tomorrow. So there will be a transition period of 2 to 3 months. And during this period, one challenge that will come is that the cost will go up. And today, you know that there's no client who is ready to pick up this check immediately. They will only write letters to us. They will say that we'll give you the price, you apply your first measure clause, you keep your records, you give us documents. So this should be a continuous fight. So the challenge comes is that, you know, do we have reserves? Do we have money to continue like this? So what we do is that we start talking to all the suppliers, all our resource people, or all machinery suppliers. We tell them that anyway, if you don't work with us, this is not going to work for you also. So it is better to use everybody's reserves to an extent. Like suppose one labor contractor is that we say that you please bear with us, we'll give you food. You stay with us for 2 months. Similarly, if the building material fellow is there, okay, you use your reserve and we also pay you partly. So like this, the contribution comes from the every stakeholder who is involved in the construction, and trust building between all the stakeholders. We should trust each other. We have to help each other. And I think only the fair game will flourish. Otherwise, it may not be possible for construction industry to survive. Now, if you say that where the investment will come, see, today, if you say railway, the railway investment is already there. The only thing it has to continue. See, we have big investment in this dedicated freight corridor. We have big investment into the high-speed railways. And those investments are already committed to the extent of 2 to 2.5 lakh crores. The only thing is that government has to act fast, talk to them and start those projects. See, today, if high-speed railway starts with, say, about 1.1 lakh crores, then it can solve the problem of at least entire state of Gujarat. Similarly, if dedicated freight corridor, which is with the railway, if it goes in the full swing, then it can solve the problem of Haryana, it can solve the problem of UP, it can solve the problem of Rajasthan, it can solve the problem of Gujarat to an extent. So the investment will come. I think road has already started. Fortunately, infrastructure, the demand is still there. See, I think investment also is not only on what government has, it also depends on that what is required. So roads are in demand. Maybe realty sector will have little bit of problem because they were already in problem. It is not that they're in problem because of COVID. There were certain issues with them because of this. Realty sector had already come in problem. So in my opinion, railways will have investment because there is a direct investment from the government, and also there are international agencies like JICA and other Japanese companies which are ready to invest here, and they have already committed investment to the extent of over 2 lakhs crore. Similarly, road is not an issue. There are many ways by which NHAI can raise funds. Like I think NHAI is the only organization which can still issue bonds for the purpose of benefit, for taking benefit if you are buying or selling any property. Like, you know, instead of giving tax on this, and you can buy those bonds and you can escape from the tax. So I think this is one thing. And spending, in my opinion, will have to come from the government, because today, what asset is required, urgently required, that is to be decided by government. I think government should invest. They can start again issuing the national savings certificate. What is the problem? They can start some borrowing schemes. So the funds will definitely come to the infrastructure, and I think spending in infrastructure is the only solution to solve this problem of, you know, the migration of labor from one state to another state. See, this labor which you see in Delhi, it is nothing but a construction labor, because suddenly the building construction stopped.
Mr. Gupta, can I just make it a little brief? We are running beyond the
So
time.
what I will say is that construction will continue. In my opinion, we are very hopeful. I don't think construction is going to stop. It's a temporary stop, and the construction has already started. And government will definitely invest into construction. Funds will come. Cash flows will be a problem, but I think all the stakeholders have to little bit put from their pocket and make it work and keep it continuing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. I mean, yeah, I do see a mixture of pessimism and optimism. I see you're talking about the challenges for the existing projects, but you also are looking forward to future projects coming up. And I know that L&T was doing fairly well till March for as far as order bookings were concerned. You had grabbed a few very large orders. But I get feedbacks about the toll roads, that the revenue projections for the existing toll roads are going to be pretty dim for the year 2021, which will basically be throttling the cash flows of most of the toll road operators, including NHAI. So we will come back to this on the second round. I move over to my questions to Mr. Mathur, Mr. Sanjay Mathur of Ultratech Cement, which is by far the #1 cement company in India by size and probably many other dimensions. So, Mr. Mathur, cement consumption is to me a good lagging indicator of any pickup in construction activities. Post 20th April, there are some murmurs about plants opening, etc., etc. So, give us a picture. Have you seen any demand pools in the market? If so, have you seen it from urban or from rural areas, from real estate or from the ongoing infrastructure projects, like what Mr. Gupta was talking about? In which regions of the country did you see demand? This will be very interesting coming from you. Will you be restarting production in some of your plants or all of your plants? Do you foresee that this demand, if any, right now, will be sustained in the short term? So the second part of the question, so this is about the operations, plant operations. The second part of the question is actually that affects all of us, but it is asked of you to give us an answer. There is going to be a major cash crunch in the coming months, and I think Mr. Lakhani and Mr. Gupta has alluded to it. And the payment cycles will be lengthened across the board, specifically for the unorganized sector and the SMEs. Quite a bit of who work in the cement distribution also and in the construction space. What are we expecting, and what is your plan to deal with this crunch? So these are the two parts of the question. Can I request you to give a brief answer, please, Mr. Mathur?
Yeah. So let me start. The cement sector, as you know, is India's largest, and of course, Ultratech, we are the largest in the country. Till March, things were very, very fine. I think last 2 years have been fairly good for the industry, with the consistent growth happening in the demand side. Now, this problem, when it started mid of March, I think there was a virtual stoppage of construction all across the country, and of course the cement sector also was hit because of that. Well, it's been just 4 to 5 days before the sector has again opened. I mean, construction has been allowed in certain areas, of course, with the caveat that you need to maintain all the social distancing and all the precautions which you need to take. Now, it is too early really to assess the situation, but there are some green shoots. I mean, what we are seeing is probably the demand in the rural sector will come fast before the urban sector really takes off. The rural sector is, by and large, to a large extent, there are areas which are still in the green zone. So, some amount of construction has started happening there. And we can see some movement, some very, very low movement happening in these markets. Now, obviously, the size of the market is so huge that, a few 1,000 metric tons here and there will not really make a difference. But I think the opportunity lies in the rural sector, because you have, you'll see that most of the projects or most of the demand where cement is flowing is into the retail segment as well as the institutional. Now, retail is roughly about 65 to 70% of the demand for cement, and the balance is institutional. Now, what we are expecting is that the institutional sales, which is, all mega projects or, all large projects like what L&T is doing, are, apart from the metros, are also, being constructed in rural India. And I think that is one large, big opportunity where probably if government puts in, the right kind of funding, I think to that extent, I think demand for cement will continue to grow. So that is one area I think which we should, in fact, we should encourage the government to, start these projects. One being the road sector. I think the road sector is quite well placed to, carry on the projects at this point of time, so that that circulation of money starts happening, people start getting employment, and this migrant labor, which has actually moved from the cities to these rural markets, actually start getting employed, alternative employment in these kind of sectors. So I think that is how the ball can roll probably in the rural markets. Second is the small retail market, which is again bulk of it is about 50-55% of the volumes come from rural India. So I think that will actually catapult the demand. Right now, the situation is that in the rural markets, but urban markets are yet to really see any major change happening. The urban markets, if you see large consumption centers, are still suffering from they are in red zones, so projects have not started. Permissions are difficult to get. The local administration is of course taking a lot of precaution in the sense that in spite of the fact that government has said that you open projects, they're still taking some time to really open up the projects in the urban sector. So I think this will take some more time before things normalize. The biggest challenge again, since cement is a very high logistic driven product, and it moves to almost every market, every nook and corner of the country. I think one of the issues is that even if the state governments allow you to move cement from one state to another, I think the local issues come in. So you're moving cement, say, from a green zone to a red zone. Their getting permissions and offloading material in those markets again becomes a big challenge. So I think that will remain for some time till we are able to find a solution of how to handle that. Because I think most of the local administrations are also skeptical on whether to give a blanket permission of moving cement to these kind of markets. So I think these are some of the major challenges. As far as the regions where we are seeing some traction, probably it's happening in piecemeals. So there are some markets in the east which have opened up. There are some markets in north which have shown some kind of movement. But the major market centers or cities like Mumbai or Delhi or NCR region or the larger markets or down south Hyderabad, these markets are still I think impacted by the current crisis, and it will take some time before the consumption really takes off. So the other point which is important is that the construction activity will probably get impacted because of the labor issue. The other is that in large states like UP, Bihar, Ramadan has started. So for the next 30 days, you have these festivals. I think the government will take a lot of precautions before they can really open up these markets. So that's one concern. And of course, the third is that the monsoons will start probably starting June, July, August. I think these 3 months traditionally are low demand months for the cement sector because the construction activity gets impacted. So I think that's another. So probably what I feel is that the demand actually will start showing up probably after the monsoons. So it takes 3 to 4 months before really we can see some traction happening across the country where cement demand would take off. And as Sanjeev was mentioning, I think one of the major ways that we can really change this scenario is to spend on infrastructure. And I think we should take up specific projects in areas which are not affected by this crisis and go full-fledged to build those projects. I think that is one solution of how people will get employment. There will be a recycling of thing, and some activity will start in those markets. So I think that is the way forward. On the cash front, the cash crunch, of course, everybody has got impacted by it. And I think fortunately in the cement sector, till March, things were very fine. So I think normal collections in cement has been fairly good. So you don't see a very major thing happening as far as the issue is concerned. But yes, going forward, most of the construction companies and all will defer their payments or probably increase the leads. So as you rightly said that.
And one of them is sitting right here. Huh?
Yeah, actually, fortunately with L&T, we have a very extremely close relationship, and I think we are the largest suppliers to L&T, across the country. So I think L&T is not an issue, but I think the smaller companies, which are into construction, I think they will face a major brunt of, the cash crisis. So I think that is one major challenge which we'll have to face. And I think this kind of a disruption, because this is a major disruption on every front, I think this will open up new opportunities and new ways of doing business. So I think we are still evolving, and probably in the next 2-3 months, I think most companies will see a different way of working, to take care of this crisis. Because this is not a normal situation. It's not like one sector getting closed or one sector getting affected. I think the entire economy, every sector, irrespective of the product or this thing, is getting impacted. So I think there'll be a visible disruption in the way we do business, and I think it'll be a big challenge for all of us, and especially the leadership team, to actually come out with the solutions of how to handle this crisis.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Mathur, for that overview. You are looking at a cautious and a slow start to cement demand picking up. In fact, probably you are looking at 3-4 months at least. Right?
Yeah.
With that overview, we now move over to London, across the ocean. We now invite Mr. Sarosh Zaiwala, the eminent lawyer who has joined us from London. Sorry. And he will add a different flavor, I'm sure, to our discussion beyond cement and construction and real estate spaces, etc. So my question to Mr. Zaiwala is that you are so well known and such an expert in the markets of South Asia, China, and in this region. What would be your word of advice from a completely different angle, from a completely different perspective? What your word of advice for these markets in relation to construction, infrastructure, or real estate, in relation to how to kickstart post this lockdown? That is one question to you. And the second question is, with your personal experience in the powers of mediation, be it in the case of the Tibetan dispute or the famed handover of Hong Kong, how do you see the role of mediation in these troubling times for the construction industry? So over to you, Mrs. Zaiwala.
Mr. Moderator, first of all, I must thank you for honoring me and inviting me, and I'm very, very pleased to be here. And the use of the word eminence is debatable. I believe that we have to remain ordinary, and with that, I have a very different perspective on the COVID saga. And I recognize that everywhere just now, even in UK, there is doom and gloom. There's so much unemployment and everybody is very distressed. But we must recognize that the longer it goes, it's going to change the face of the world. And let's make it, and the best way to do it is to let's make it a growing experience and not a groaning experience. We can complain about it, but let's be positive and find opportunities. I see the beginning of a new world order, not immediately, but very soon, because people are realizing generally that we are one world. And in that, I see a lot of opportunities for Indian businesses, especially construction businesses. Having lived in England for most of my life now, I find that the Indian mind is very creative and very competent, and Indian businesses are now doing well. The opportunity I see most for the construction industry is international opportunity. I have represented Chinese government for many years, and they are very much into the construction industry in the Middle East and especially Africa. In Africa, they have taken over virtually the major construction industry. Now, one of the things which might well come out of this COVID saga is that the countries are going to be very suspicious about China, about how it handled the situation. And there is already a move. Now, this is the time for the Indian middle sector construction industry to start planning for getting into countries like Middle East and Africa and competing with and presenting a better service. Africa, for example, countries in East Africa and all over Africa, they are looking to grow and construct industries. And that is where we should come in. This is my first thing which I'm going to say. So be positive, take this as an opportunity. There is going to be some difficulty. There is going to be cash flow problems for the next 6 months or a year. We are still uncertain how long it is going to go on, but we must be optimistic and prepare for the best and take it as a growing opportunity. I'm going to come to my specialty now, because business, I'm going to leave it to the eminent speakers who spoke before me and the opportunities, and I'm not competent to advise them on what to do. Mediation. I think it is now recognized that mediation is the right solution. And I remember as a young lawyer in India representing the Indian High Commission, Indian government, we had a big case versus STD concerning State Trading Corporation concerning a silver dispute, sale of silver dispute. And Mr. Parasaran, the Attorney General of India, was in the car with me and we settled it. And I said, don't you think it is a bad settlement? We could have gone ahead in the court. And his words still ring, that a bad settlement is better than a good victory. And I asked him why. And he said, because when you have a good victory, the opponent becomes your enemy and he hates you. But if you have a settlement, there's an opportunity to do business again. So you must always remember that. Now, I'm a qualified mediator, and I'm going to give you one or two of my examples of how mediation is helpful. The biggest advantage of a mediation, depending on the experience of the mediator, is to bring the party together and open up. And it is confidential, it's completely confidential. He is not restricted by not talking to the parties individually. So parties can be very open with the mediator, talk to them. And the duty of a mediator is not to suggest a solution, but to get the parties to think on their own by his questions, asking them questions, and say, would it not be better if this happens? And that way get the parties together. I'll give you an example just now of one of the biggest ever case in the English history, which was the Bank Malad versus Her Majesty's government. It was about nuclear sanction, and I was personally involved. We won in the Supreme Court. We had a claim for $4.2 billion against the UK government for damages. The Supreme Court found that the UK government had acted unlawfully and irrationally in listing a private bank, private international bank, partly owned by the Iran government, for allegedly supporting Iran nuclear proliferation. It was a 6 week trial fixed for 15th of July in 2019. Quite honestly, we were also not very confident because of 23 Iranian witnesses. You never know what happens and who gives evidence. And so I decided to apply for mediation. The government was refusing to talk, saying, go away. And we applied for mediation. The government as a defendant opposed it, but the judge ordered mediation. And in 4 days of mediation, we settled the matter. And at the end, everybody shook hands and the payment was made, everything was closed. The advantage of a mediation is it allows the business to continue and not bring about acrimony. And that is the thing. Now, look at the arbitration. Today, the arbitrations are no longer what it used to be when I started nearly 40 years ago, when it was a friendly arbitration. Now the arbitration has become like a court procedure. There are retired judges, without any disrespect to them, sitting as judges and arbitrators. They have adjournments, and it goes on. And the commercial people are now fed up of arbitration unless there is a very important, large amount involved. And therefore, mediation is a good remedy. A good mediator knows how to approach and tackle the parties and get them to settle. As a matter of statistics, it is the CEDAR, which is the Center for International Mediation, have given statistics. Then in mediation, about 85 to 90% of the cases are settled either in mediation or within 2 weeks of the mediation getting over. And the balance of the 10%, also about 4 or 5%, are also resolved before the trial. Because what happens is that parties when the parties have litigation, they are hostile to each other. Their mindset is very negative. They persuade themselves that this person has done wrong, he has cheated me, and he's a crook. But when you start mediation, you start talking through the mediator first, and then in the mediator's presence with each other. And then they suddenly realized that they are all the same and we're all business people, so we have to get on. So I certainly think that the mediation is the best solution. Let me give you this example also at a higher level mediation. I was representing the Chinese government for many years, I was going to travel with the British government minister, Sir Richard Needham, to China, and the trip was cancelled. And I asked the ambassador, why has the trip been cancelled? He told me very honestly that the British government has not behaved very well because they had suspicion on the handover of Hong Kong that there was a perception in the Chinese mind that the British, Margaret Thatcher had undersold Hong Kong, so the British government is going to backtrack and is not going to give up Hong Kong in 1997. Now, as it happened at that time, John Major and I were quite close. And I said, do you want me to speak to him? He said, yes. And I arranged a meeting at my office, 2 meetings, which was attended by the leader of the House of Lords and a representative of 10 Downing Street and somebody from from the Central Committee and the ambassador. And over a fruit lunch, they talked very openly without civil servants, and they started a second channel of dialogue. And the Chinese government was assured that is not the intention of the British government. So the lesson from that is that people start talking openly and fearlessly when you're talking one-to-one, than in an arbitration where there is as it happens now, there is hostility all round. The Dalai Lama came to me, I think it was 2010 or 2011 or something. I've said in my book. He said that he would like China to start talking. I spoke to the Chinese ambassador at the Central Committee. They couldn't say no to me at that time because we were acting for China. They said, have a meeting. We had a meeting. But the Chinese government had a meeting with me, first meeting, and we started the first mediation. And then they said they made a fast move, or they asked the brother of the Dalai Lama to go to China, and that was a mess. And then I went in 2012 to China. They told me there is no need now to have any dialogue because after the Dalai Lama's death, Tibet will not be an issue. Now, the lesson from that is that for mediation, you require 2 parties willing to settle. If one party is not willing to settle and one party has other interests or other strategy, then the mediation does not work. And then you require a court order. But generally, a mediation is a consensual process. And I have handled many mediation, and people generally are very happy. What we all need to do is to have experienced mediators who are prepared to have a change of concept and not act like lawyers. There must be commercial men, or it must be lawyers who have a commercial mind, or retired judges. But retired judges must also recognize that what is required is a commercial solution and not a legal solution. The other thing, most important in mediation, it is not the duty of a mediator to give advice. He only makes the parties think and come to their own solution. And that is the beauty of mediation. So with that, sir, unless you want me to answer any questions, I'm not going to spend more time on it. And I want to be precisely to the point. Thank you for inviting me again.
Thank you, Mr. Zayala. But there may be some questions to you from the participants. So,
yeah.
But you have. Thanks very much for so eloquently taking up the cause of mediation, which I thought I will do in a few words, but that's no longer necessary because you have been so forceful in explaining to us why it is so brilliant, that the idea of mediation. So the original idea was that we make a second round of questions, which are specifically relating to disputes in these specific sectors. And I see that we have already hit 45 minutes. And depending on if we don't have too many questions, we can probably cannibalize a few minutes from the audience question and answer session. So I will just go over to the 3 industry and business participants here. And very quickly, just in 2-3 sentences, if you can tell us, otherwise everybody will not get a chance.
Can I just say, I was prepared an answer. Just say this: in the UK, the construction industry disputes have already started on whether there is force majeure and section.
Tell us something. Just in 2 minutes, can you give us a flavor?
I will tell you, because in fact, the disputes have already started. The constructions have stopped, and especially the apartment owners now want to cancel the contract because they don't have the cash or they are worried about the future. So most of them have an arbitration clause, And I really don't know how it's going to end. But I know as my law firm, at least we have got international clients coming. We want to stop this joint venture project. What can we do? Can we take advantage of the coronavirus and say it is what is known as a force majeure, which is equivalent to Section 56 of the Indian Contract Act? And that's a very difficult answer, because for a force majeure, one has to go back to the time when the contract was signed. What was in parties' mind?
Yeah.
Force majeure is a supervening impossibility. And whether it is a supervening impossibility because there's going to be a loss or in monetary loss is a question which the courts have yet to consider. So with that, I'm going to say that leave it to you.
Yeah, right. Thank you. So in this unprecedented lockdown situation, we all have been thrown into a very, very extreme business environment. There is a huge amount of stress all around, and both of the emotional and economical kind. Buyers and sellers, customers and suppliers, shareholders and acquirers, and even employers and employees may find it difficult to accept each other's points of view. So, which, even enduring business relationships for many years may come under intense pressure. Please tell us now. I mean, I'm going to start with let's say Mr. Lakhani, and then 2 minutes for each of us. Tell us now how this will manifest in your sector, or how this is already manifesting in your sector in terms of any conflicts or disputes. It's not that we want disputes, but if there are any, please share with us in very brief.
Sure, absolutely, Mr. Banerjee. So, whether I would call it a disagreement, dispute, I would not go into the vocabulary. But as I was saying, there's still 50 to 60% of the demand, which is at an impasse with us. Now, if we are at a point where there is nothing moving forward, there are no payments, the whole economic cycle is basically completely suspended or at a pause with no real outcome as such, I would call it a disagreement or a dispute. People are using all sorts of whether commercial, technical, or moral arguments. But I think eventually it is going to be solved by just sitting across the table, and that would, that's what I would call a mediation. And it's somewhat romantic to look at a commercial issue through the lens of ethics or morality, but still, eventually, it's going to be about what's a win-win solution on both sides, what's a constructive solution. And eventually, as I was saying, it's going to be about when the lockdown opens, when we have a little bit more certainty, people sit across the table and find a solution to these problems. And these are the disputes we'll have to really address across the whole value chain. We are a service provider, which is a small intermediary in a fairly high-stakes value chain. And with all these stakeholders, with competing priorities, it's basically going to be a negotiation across the table eventually.
Mr. Gupta, do you see any stress converting into any conflicts in your sector? Do you see any early murmurs of disputes?
The impact will come.
Yeah.
Impact will come after some time. You see, today what has happened is up to March 31st, I think all the government clients have cleared their payments. This is what we see. So cash flow issue has really not started. Now, government departments have been proactive, and they have already issued a letter to all the contractors that this will be treated as force majeure, and they have also said that some labor part and etc. they will cover. So I think government has been proactive in giving this assurance to all the contractors. Now, I don't think that the solution of this COVID-19 problem is going to be in arbitration or disputes. I think both the parties have to sit together, trust each other, and solve each other's problem. If you go to the dispute, you see that solution will come after years, and the impact is coming now. So whatever stimulus or whatever help is to be given, it is to be given now. So I don't think that, of course, that's a long-term solution. That's a long-term solution. But to come out from this solution, I think, as they said, that both the parties should be willing to talk. And I think parties are willing. This is at least my personal experience, that there's no one who is not listening. And everybody has got his own constraints, but still ready to help. And this is what we see, a tremendous support from the government machinery, starting from Home Ministry or from state administration or even from the clients, like our dedicated freight corridor. So we only see that everybody is willing to restart. Everybody is willing to cooperate and do. Of course, there will be some dispute. If there are some clients who are not listening to us, So we have to see that it depends on a project and client for as far as construction industry is concerned. I don't think that from our suppliers will not have any problems. I think so because we have long-lasting relations. We have great contracts. Similarly, from our labor contractors will not have any problem because they have been living with us for 30 years, 40 years with us. So only problem would come is from the clients. And I think most of the clients we have trust from the clients. They know that if they give money to L&T, they are working and they are not wasting money. So I don't foresee any major dispute at this stage. And that stage would come, that still come after a long time. I think we should talk to them, listen to them, they will listen to us, and the problems are getting solved. This is what I've seen in last 45 days, 45 days.
That's wonderful. I mean, the sense of solidarity and the sense of cooperation, and it's really good to hear that. And Mr. Mathur, is it the similar scenario, or do you want to give us a sense
No, it's a very similar scenario. In fact, we've not seen any major disputes happening. In fact, the confidence building exercise which we have undertaken, I think a very close interaction with all the stakeholders, I think that has really helped us. And we feel that probably this is a short-term issue, probably next 3 months to 6 months or whatever. But I think in the long term, I mean, all our vendors, be it vendors or suppliers or, the customers, I think are long term. So they are seeing the larger picture. And hopefully, I think, once this is over, I think the situation will definitely be in favor of, all of us. So I don't see any disputes happening. And of course, if in case there are any, I think mediation and, talking across the table, I think that is the best solution rather than getting into any arbitration. So I don't see a major challenge right now. And in the future also, I think if we are constantly in touch with these stakeholders, I think that will be a very positive thing to do for everyone.
That's again wonderful, Mr. Mathur. We in Center for Mediation, we aim for dispute-free commerce. And if at all there is any dispute in the unfortunate situation, then we are there. So before we go over to the question and answer session, and I'll be guided by Siddharth on the shortlisted questions soon. Mrs. Aiwala, would you like to give any final word of advice, in just a couple of sentences for our industry participants in India? You are muted. You are muted. Mrs. Aiwala, you are muted. Please unmute. Yeah.
I'm unmute. Okay. I entirely agree with the previous speakers. It is too early for disputes to really crystallize, but there are bound to be some friction and the difference of opinion. And that's where I think the best way to resolve it would be by mediation. As Mr. Lakhani said, that to go for arbitration or court process is absolutely hopeless. And in a construction industry where both sides must recognize that there are problems on both sides. The one contractor may not have the cash flow. One contractor may have a cash flow problem, and the other side, the industry might have some other problems. So the best thing would be to organizations like yours to bring forward a competent mediation team and encourage the mediators to qualify and not only from legal profession but from commercial profession.
Thank you. Now, Siddharth, we have just 2 more minutes, but if we take the liberty, with the permission of all attendees and panelists, to add 5 minutes extra to the overall time, you can probably deal with 2 or 3 questions quickly.
I have sent the questions to you. If you want, I can read it out, or you may check your chat. I've sent the question.
I'll just check the chat. I'm still getting used to the.
I think he can read. That is okay. Everybody is listening. So
Yeah, you can read.
You can just go ahead and read. Yeah.
So there's this question for Mr. Zaiwala. In Indian governments, in India, governments are the biggest litigants. What mechanism and mindset or leadership is required to encourage governments to refer their matters to mediation?
I think is a very interesting question. I think the first thing the government team must do is to have confidence in themselves that they can resolve the problem. I have acted for Indian government for many years in England, and I find the real problem is the feeling that, look, we can't take the risk if we get it wrong, so let the court decide. Now that mindset is to be changed in the government circle. We are no longer a colonial rule country. Our civil servant must be able to take decision and say, look, there is an issue, let's sit together and solve it, and not like in the past, we can't take the chance. If I got it wrong, I lose my job. Let's let the court decide. So that is the fundamental change which I would advise the Indian government and all governments to accept.
Very good. There's a next question is for Mr. Vikas Lakhani. The question is, the concept of move out of jobs to remote locations enabled by technology also may mean that businesses may open to outsourcing much of their non-core activities. Does that portend well for domestic BPO or KPO?
Absolutely. So there are two aspects to this, and I would it's too early to actually say how things will shape up. But one thing is clear in terms of trends. What's likely to happen is there's going to be a massive realignment in the way we operate. And I think all the eminent panelists have already reflected on that fact. How that realignment or reshaping would happen is yet to be seen. Now, that note, yes, one thing is clear from a trend perspective, anything non-core would be outsourced. We would be working in a much more, purely from a workplace strategy perspective, we would be working in isolated environments, but in a more collaborative ecosystem. If you see from a technology standpoint, all collaborative technologies, Basecamp, Zoom, over the years, Slack, have done extremely well. Co-working spaces or flexible workspaces have done extremely well. Again, the whole reason is you want to be collaborative, yet you want to be distributed in a distributed environment. So yes, from a BPO, KPO perspective, what services will be outsourced is yet to be seen. Many of these services may not even exist in future. We don't know over the next 12 to 18 months. But yes, as a trend, everything non-core would be outsourced from now on.
And there's one last question due to the paucity of time. One last question for Mr. Sanjay Mathur, Mr. Sanjeev Gupta, and Mr. Vikas Lakhani. In such challenging, uncertain circumstances, has your company any plans to resolve the disputes or difference through online arbitration or online mediation?
I will say, actually, we have already started. We had a dispute with an ICC, and the board has agreed that we can do the discussions on the video conferencing. So I think that is already coming, and I think that is going to be a solution. And what we have found is that this is very good and more effective. You see, today I'm working from home. I'm doing more work than what I was doing in office, and still I save some time for cooking for my wife and myself. So I think it is very good.
Mr. Mathur?
Well, I think we haven't seen any such major disputes coming in, but I think if there are, probably mediation and discussion on a virtual platform is far better. It's more specific. You are sitting across the table and I think taking decisions. So I think it will work very well. I don't see any major issue coming in this.
How about Mr. Lakhani? What would you answer? I think we have. I'll ask this question. Yeah, he's frozen. I'll ask this question to Mr. Zaiwala. Mr. Zaiwala, what is the situation in London? Like, is this a time for online mediation? Do online mediations are happening? Are companies preferring online mediation or arbitration?
Well, online arbitrations have already started, and online court hearings have started. We are at present acting for Central Bank of Venezuela, who has a claim against Bank of England for gold, which is not given by political issue. And the court had a hearing online, an interlocutory hearing. So that has already started. The courts are working in England regularly now online. We are all settling down. We are not so used to it now, but we are getting used to it. And I foresee that in future, the online events are going to be more and more, including court hearing, mediation. And I don't see why we can't have an online mediation. I see a future for online mediation too, because as one of the speakers said, that now he has time to cook, so it's better to stay at home and focus on resolving the dispute than wasting time on travel.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we will send a plus report to Mr. Gupta's wife.
Just one thing, one information I want to give. This managing director DFC, he had a review with us on this Zoom, and he said in future he is not going to call anyone to Delhi. He is going to have reviews only on Zoom, and it was so effective, and everybody was so happy.
Yeah.
There's so much of clarity and so much of comfort and waste, saving of time going to Delhi, spending one day. The same thing can be done in 2 hours.
Yeah. So I see that a small benefit, obviously very small compared to damage coronavirus is wreaking on the earth, but a small benefit, time will tell if it becomes bigger, is a lot of CO2 will be saved, I think, in future. In
Yes.
traveling all
Yeah.
over the globe. Willy-nilly, people will travel less, both for business as well as for tourism and etc. etc. So if that was the last question, Siddharth, then I just wanted to, before I invite Sandeep, I just wanted to say that in CMC, Center for Mediation, we already have 2 examples of having, I mean, even before the lockdown, 2 examples of having conducted mediation over telephone between disputants located in A city and C city, and we being in B city, the mediator being in B city. So across 3 locations, we conducted mediation, and such mediation also in those 2 examples that I talk about have got resolved in 2 meetings. So this is something that has given us a lot of satisfaction and an idea about the potential of virtual mediation going forward. And I just wanted us all to sign off with that positive note. And Sandeep is with us. He's the DG of Bombay Chamber, and he has been patiently listening in to us, and he is kindly also consented to give us the vote of thanks. And I hand over the proceedings now to you, Sandeep.
Thanks, Sumit. I enjoyed myself, so many different perspectives. So thanks a lot. I'll just begin on a slightly filmy note. Currently we are all on Rajesh Khanna. I just hope that we quickly move on to Manoj Kumar, by which I mean that in 74, Rajesh Khanna came with roti. So today everyone's mind is how will we get our next roti? And nobody's thinking of roti, kapda or makan at the moment. Where do we wear any kapdas? That is something which will take time to come. Makan again is similar. My last stint was with Midday, and from 2016 to the early part of 2019, every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there were multiple front pages full of real estate, commercial, residential. You open the Times of India, you open the Hindustan Times, and I'm referring to Mumbai essentially, but it was similar throughout the country. And it was all about real estate. And suddenly, towards the later part of 2019, there was a slowdown, and now this is impacted in a manner where I do not know, as has been articulated by all the panelists, as to when this will open out. Because although, as Mr. Gupta said, labor is a problem, labor also which is waiting in the cities, the moment it opens up, a lot of them will rush back home. When they're going to come back to the cities to start in the construction activity is anybody's guess. Working from remote location, I have seen example myself. One of my friends, the CEO of a very large, even the largest radio station, is now in his second home in Alibag and enjoying himself. So he's there for 1.5 months. He's saying my radio station is working perfectly all right from a remote location, and I plan to now spend more time and look at my Mumbai flat more as a weekend holiday home when I will come back here. So, different things would start where we will start looking at how do we, restructure, reorient ourselves once the COVID is behind us. Year is supposed to be very tough. Fitch has already said that, we might finish the year at 0.8 compared to 4.9 growth, which we had. I do not know how pessimistic is that, or is that even optimistic? Some people are saying even that is optimistic. One doesn't know. I think 2021 or 22 is when most of the things will happen. at this point of time, I think mediation, as Sumit has very well articulated, is something which most companies should look at. He has been at it for the past 3 years. Bombay Chamber has invested a lot of time in mediation. And at this point of time, rather than after opening up, people going and wasting a lot of time in courts, I think mediation is the best foot forward. So thank you all my panelists, Mr. Sanjay Gupta, Mr. Sanjeev Gupta, Mr. Sanjay Mathur, Mr. Lakhani, Mr. Zaiwala for giving us your perspective. And on a very humorous note, Mr. Gupta, if you ever need mediation as to who cooks better, Sumit would volunteer.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all attendees for being patient.
Thank you to all the attendees. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Banerjee. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Mr. Banerjee, thank you for conducting so well. Bye.
Thank you so much.